Hello and welcome. So today I'd like to do a film review. I've done a few of those already. This one is kind of special to me. It's called Two on a Guillotine. And I saw this when I was a kid. This was made, I think, in 1965. And I saw it, I must have been 7, maybe 6, maybe 8, I'm not sure. But I saw it when I was a kid for the very first time. Made a huge impact on me. And so I thought I would share a little bit about it. Two on a Guillotine. Two on a Guillotine, made in 1965, stars Connie Stevens, Dean Jones, and Cesar Romero. Now you might know Dean Jones from Love Bug fame. This would be a few years, maybe 3-4 years before the Love Bug. The film begins with the funeral of the Great Duquesne, played by Cesar Romero as the magician. His body is in a glass casket, and it's surrounded by chains because he has claimed that he's going to come back from the dead. Connie Stevens has a dual role in the film. She plays the daughter of the Great Duquesne, and she also plays his wife 25 years previous. She's the spitting image of her mother at that age. Early 20-something Cassie Duquesne must stay in his mansion for 7 nights in order to inherit her father's fortune. Reporter Val Henderson, played by Dean Jones, offers to stay with her, hoping to report on the return from the dead of the Great Duquesne. You don't know if his spirit haunts the house. You don't know if he's rigged the house before his death. You don't know if there's some people, I think the housekeeper, the manager, these people have a claim on the Great Duquesne's fortune. So you're not sure if maybe they're up to something sinister. And you don't know if maybe there's actually a spirit at work. And that's part of the eeriness of the whole film. She has to stay 7 days in this gothic mansion. And so it's a fantastic setup for a great movie. This is Cesar Romero in the title part. He is the Great Duquesne, a magician. Take a look at that. I mean, this film was made in '65, right? So Blackstone would be winding up his career. We're looking at the tail end of a couple of decades, really, after the Golden Age. But that's what a magician looked like in 1965. And Cesar Romero was fantastic in this movie. So here is a photograph of the Great Duquesnes performing together 20 years prior to the story unfolding. And this is one of the early scenes in the film where the Great Duquesne shoves a sword through her body. She screams and passes out. Bone chilling. It was wonderful to watch. It was, especially as a child watching this. Here she is, Connie Stevens. Her first night in the house, he's got something rigged there. A skeleton shoots down a chute at her. She screams. Dean Jones is there. He pushes the skeleton in the back. He realizes at this point that the house is rigged. But there's a lot more to it than that. And the story, as the story unfolds, here he is again, Dean Jones, Connie Stevens, hearing creepy sounds in the house. And one of the things I love about this, it's called Two on a Guillotine. So you know that the guillotine is going to play a role in the film. But you're not sure exactly how, you're not sure exactly what, you're not sure why the film is entitled Two on a Guillotine. But at various times, especially in the middle of the night, you hear the clankety clank of the chain as the blade is pulled up and locked into place. You know, you hear this, and you don't know where it's coming from. It kind of echoes through the whole house, and they hear noises, they hear footsteps, they hear all kinds of creepy sounds, and so they investigate this potentially haunted house. Here's a scene of Connie Stevens alone at night, wandering the halls, trying to investigate where that creak came from. And here she is discovering the guillotine with the blade fully locked into place. There's something very gothic about the film. There's something magical about the film. I hope you'll go out and see it. Two on a Guillotine. Dean Jones, Connie Stevens, Cesar Romero. This was one of the films that I saw when it was first released for television. I didn't see it in the theater. I potentially could have, but I didn't. But I saw it when it was first released on television. And then it became a regular feature many of you might not know or might not remember this, but there were ghost hosts at one point. Now they went by different names. So we had Gore Duvall. I think Elvira is probably the most famous ghost host. But in the 1960s and up until, I would say, the advent of Saturday Night Live, you had local celebrities or local television people dressing up in costume and hosting a horror movie, usually a very campy horror movie, on Saturday night. And what they would do is they would introduce the film. My favorite, now I heard that George Gobel actually did this. I haven't been able to verify that. I have a few books on the subject. I review histories. But I understand that Gobel was the creature feature host who, as the show began, there was a fog-covered graveyard, and there was a casket set up on, I guess, sawhorses. And the casket would open, and he would sit up, and he'd be in, kind of Dracula attire. And the cool thing, now I'm remembering this from when I was a child. I lived on Andover Road at the time. I was younger than 11 because we moved out of there when I was 11. But he would sit up in his casket and he would turn on a television set. And he would face you, the audience, and he would talk about the film. And he would give you a synopsis, very much like I just did, tell you why the film's important. And then you'd see a few minutes of the film, 15, 20 minutes, and then for commercial breaks, you'd cut back to your creature feature and they'd do something campy, something crazy, something funny. This was good fun, folks. This was good fun. Tell you a little story about that. Years later, now I'd studied filmmaking, I'd studied broadcasting as an undergraduate. I had a couple of different majors, okay? So, and filmmaking and broadcasting was one. So I had some experience in front of the camera, and I wanted to resurrect the ghost host. I couldn't find one anywhere. Now, Elvira was still doing things, but you had to be, I just didn't know how to access it. It wasn't the same. I mean, Saturday night was special because Saturday night was creature feature night. At 11:30, I tuned in, I guess from the time I was 7 or 8 until the time that Saturday Night Live premiered. I remember the night that Saturday Night Live premiered. I had my buddy Tom Brandow over, I think it was Tom, and we were in the basement getting ready to watch the creature feature. And we heard live from New York, it's Saturday night, and I didn't know what Saturday Night Live was at the time, so I was just disappointed that it wasn't the creature feature, but never again, never again. So I went around to all the local studios here in Baltimore, including Maryland Public Television, and I pitched them on the idea of doing a creature feature, hosted creature feature. And every one of them said to me, people have too much access. If they want to watch a horror movie, they can watch it. They don't need to tune into a creature feature. But I think they were missing the point, because there's a relationship between the horror movie host and the audience. That's the point. And that's what's missing. So if you didn't get to experience that as a child, I'm sorry. I wish you had. I'd love to bring it back. I just haven't had the opportunity. I'm still looking for that opportunity. But back to my topic. Two on a Guillotine, folks. 1965. Gothic, moody. Some would call it campy. I'm not sure it rises to the level of camp. Maybe. I mean, a lot of horror films in the period did. And that's a subject of a judgment call. But again, when you're a child and you're formulating your ideas of what a magician is, this was one of the influences on me, certainly. And I don't really bring a lot of the macabre to what I do, the way that the Great Duquesne does, the character in this film. But certainly the air of mystery, and the fact that, and this is something that I think is important here, in the 1950s, in the 1960s, the 1940s, all the way back into the Golden Age, magicians were magicians 100% of the time. They weren't, when the show was over and they left the stage, they weren't off. And they lived it, and that's portrayed in this film very well. So, folks, Two on a Guillotine, I hope you'll check it out. Thanks for joining me. By the way, please subscribe, please comment, and many of you have, and I want you to know I appreciate it. I read those comments, I reply. I appreciate that you take the time to do that. I appreciate that you have subscribed. Thank you so much for encouraging me to continue and to do this. I love doing this, and I love interacting with you. So I will see you next time. Thanks again. Bye-bye.